In this video, I'm going to show you how to accomplish perfect mitered corners for your quilt binding. But if we're going to cover binding, we might as well just start from the beginning. Okay, let's start from the beginning. To make our binding, the first thing we need to do is cut our strips of fabric. Most quilters use either 2.5 inch or 2.25 inch wide strips of fabric to make their binding. I prefer to do 2.25 inch, and that's exactly what we're going to do for these quilted placemats. Next, we need to sew our strips of fabric together end to end to create one long strip of fabric. And to do that, I like to place my pieces of binding together, right sides together at a 90-degree angle, and then sew from corner to corner. Then you'll trim the excess off and trim off the dog ears and press those seams open. After you press open all of those seams, the next thing we need to do is fold this binding in half lengthwise and then give it a good press all the way down. And there you go. Don't you wish it was that fast in real life? Once we have our binding ironed, we need to attach it to the edge of the quilt by lining up the raw edges of the binding with the raw edge of the quilt. And make sure you leave a tail about 10 to 12 inches, and you'll use that to attach the ends when you go all the way around your quilt. And you can use a walking foot if you have one, but a standard presser foot will work just fine for this. And making sure that you are sewing at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, when you're approaching the corner, here's how you do the mitered corner. You're going to stop your stitches approximately a 1/4 inch from the edge of the quilt, backstitch, and then cut the thread. Next, you're going to turn your quilt 90 degrees so you can start sewing down the next side of the quilt. But before that, you need to fold the binding away from you, so you create a 45-degree fold, and you can give it a quick finger press just to keep it straight, and then fold the binding back towards you at a 90-degree angle. Now at this point, you can pin or clip this in place. I really like to use wonder clips, or I'll just hold it in place with my fingers. And now you're going to continue stitching down that next side of the quilt by starting at the very edge of the quilt, making sure that you are back stitching at the beginning to hold that in place. And then just continue sewing down that side of the quilt until you reach the next corner, and then you will repeat those same steps to do another mitered corner. To finish that mitered corner on the back side of the quilt, you just continue folding that binding over the edge of the quilt, keeping that flat and taut, and then fold the next side over to have those points meet at the same 90-degree angle so that you're creating that 45-degree fold at the corner. That's what's going to give you that really nice mitered corner. And then make sure you hold everything in place with a couple clips or a couple pins. At this point, you can continue sewing your binding onto the back side of the quilt with whatever method you have chosen, whether that's big stitch binding like I'm doing here, hand sewing with an invisible whip stitch, or machine sewing by stitching in the ditch on the front side of the quilt, which is what I'm doing on these quilted placemats. Like I said, just make sure you are either keeping everything in place with either pins or clips. That's really the key and the trick to creating those perfect mitered corners. Well, there you have it, folks. That is my quick and to the point tutorial on how to get those nice mitered corners when you're doing your quilt binding. Thank you so much for watching. Have an awesome day.